The wrench in Tucker Reid's hand was the wrong size, and he knew it before he even touched the bolt. That was the kind of morning it was. The kind where everything was slightly off. The coffee had gone cold on the workbench. Nora had forgotten her lunch again, and he'd had to drive it to Millfield Elementary on his way back from the parts supplier, which made him late opening the garage, which meant the Hendersons' Silverado had been sitting in the bay since 7:30 with nobody touching it. And now the wrong wrench. He set it down, found the right one, got back under the truck. Outside, Millfield went about its business. Tuesday morning in late October, the maple on the corner of Route 9 had gone the color of a burn, orange-red and almost violent in the gray light. Tucker could see it through the open bay door if he turned his head at the right angle. He'd lived in this town for 6 years, and the trees still surprised him every fall. Sarah used to say it was the most honest thing in Millfield. Everything else here, she'd say, pretends to be something it's not. She'd been right about most things. He finished with the Silverado, washed his hands, poured the cold coffee down the drain, and made fresh. At 11, his phone rang. Unknown number, which he almost didn't answer. He answered anyway. "Is this Tucker Reid?" A woman's voice. Clipped. East Coast professional, the kind that came from expensive schools and expensive offices. Depends who's asking. "My name is Patricia Dunn. I'm senior legal counsel for Hartwell Automotive Group." A pause. "We need to speak with you, in person." Tucker set down his mug. "Hartwell." "Yes." Hartwell Automotive Group was the third largest automotive manufacturer in the Midwest. They had 4 assembly plants, 1,700 employees, and a headquarters tower in Columbus that you could see from the highway. Tucker knew their name the way anyone in the industry knew it. He also knew something most people didn't. "When?" he said. "Tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. Our office is in Columbus." He looked around the garage. The Silverado needed another hour. He had a '09 Camry coming in Thursday with a transmission problem. Nora had a half-day Friday that he'd forgotten to arrange coverage for. "I'll be there," he said. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Not Jimmy, who ran the gas station next door and would have asked 11 questions. Not Mrs. Okafor, who watched Nora after school and had a way of seeing through things Tucker wasn't ready to explain. He just drove the 2 hours to Columbus in his work truck, with the Reid Auto Service logo fading on the door, parked in a garage that charged $15 an hour, and walked into a building that had more square footage than the entire main street of Millfield. The lobby of Hartwell Automotive Group was the kind of space designed to make a person feel small. 40-foot ceilings, a reception desk that stretched across the back wall like an altar. The floor was polished concrete, gunmetal gray, and Tucker's boots made a sound on it that felt accusatory, like they were announcing what he was before he even opened his mouth. A man in a blazer appeared at his elbow almost immediately, young, smooth, with the particular blankness of someone trained to be a human buffer. "Mr. Reid?" "Yeah. I'm going to have to ask you to wait here while I verify your appointment." He said it pleasantly, but his eyes had already done the scan. The work pants, the truck logo on Tucker's jacket, the grease that never fully left his knuckles no matter how hard he scrubbed. Tucker waited. He'd gotten good at waiting. 6 years of being patient, of letting things come to him instead of going after them. Sarah had called it his monk phase, not unkindly. She'd understood why. After Kessler Wade collapsed and took half the industry with it, after Tucker had spent 3 years building their propulsion systems division, only to watch the executive team walk away with golden parachutes while the engineers were handed boxes, he'd needed somewhere quiet to put himself back together. Millfield was quiet. The garage had been his uncle's. It was small and honest, and nothing in it pretended to be more than what it was. He'd been fine there. He still was, mostly, Mr. Reid. The blazer man was back. "Mrs. Dunn will see you now." The elevator went to the 22nd floor. The hallway up there was all dark panels and recessed lighting, the kind of aesthetic that said money by pretending to whisper. Patricia Dunn's office was at the end of it, corner room, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Columbus in the dull October light. She was in her late 40s, silver-streaked hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a chain she wasn't currently wearing. She looked like someone who had eaten harder problems than Tucker Reid for breakfast and was still hungry. "Sit down," she said, without looking up from whatever she was reading. He sat. She set the papers aside and looked at him for a long moment, appraising. The same scan as the man downstairs, but sharper, more interested in what it found. Do you know why you're here? I have some ideas, Tucker said. The Meridian patent. She said it like a test. Tucker nodded slowly. The Meridian patent. 3 years ago, during his last 18 months at Kessler-Wade, Tucker had developed a combustion optimization system he'd called Meridian internally, a way of improving fuel efficiency in large diesel engines by 31% without hardware modification. Just calibration. Just code, essentially, though calling it that undersold what it had taken him 4 years to build. When Kessler-Wade collapsed, the patent applications had been in legal limbo. Tucker's name was on them. His alone, because he'd been careful about that, had sensed even then that the company was coming apart at the seams and hadn't wanted his work to disappear into a bankruptcy proceeding. He'd won that fight, barely. The patents were his. He had not done much with them since. There hadn't seemed to be a point. He was in Millfield. He had Nora. He had the garage. We've been trying to reach you for 8 months, Dunn said. I know. Her eyes sharpened. You ignored our outreach. I wasn't interested, Mr. Reid. She leaned forward. The Meridian system is worth conservatively $200 million in licensing revenue over the next decade. Your patents cover 4 core applications that Hartwell is currently attempting to develop independently. If you license to us, you become very wealthy. If you don't, she let the sentence sit there. If I don't, Tucker said, you keep developing your version and hope it doesn't infringe. Something like that. He looked out the window. Columbus sprawled out below, gray and purposeful. He thought about the garage, about Nora's lunchbox sitting on the kitchen counter this morning because she'd been in a hurry to show him the drawing she'd done of their dog, a yellow lab named Bucket who'd been dead for 2 years, but who she still drew regularly, still placed in scenes of her life as if he were ongoing. Who set up this meeting? Tucker asked. Dunn blinked. I did. Who above you pushed for it? A pause. Fractional, but there. That's not relevant. Then we're done. Tucker stood. Mr. Reid, someone's been developing my system without a license for at least 2 years. Someone inside Hartwell knew about Meridian before your legal team reached out to me. I want to know who. He held her gaze. Then we can talk about licensing. He left her office and took the elevator down and walked back across that enormous lobby and out into the October air. His truck was where he'd left it. He drove back to Millfield, picked Nora up from Mrs. Okafor's, made pasta for dinner, helped her with her reading homework. That night, after she was asleep, he called the only person he trusted to tell him if he was about to do something stupid. Martin, he said when his old colleague answered, I need your help with something. Martin Chu had been the only other engineer at Kessler-Wade who Tucker had fully respected. He was now at a firm in Detroit that did IP consulting and had access to things Tucker didn't. How much trouble are you in? Martin said. None yet, but I'm about to go looking for some. Martin was quiet for a moment. This about Meridian? Hartwell's been using a version of it. I want to know who authorized that internally. Martin inhaled slowly. Tucker, Hartwell is not a small company. I know. You have a garage. You have a 7-year-old. She's 8. My point stands. Martin. Tucker looked at the window. The maple on Route 9 was invisible in the dark. Someone took my work. They took 4 years of my life, and they've been profiting from it for 2 years while I've been changing oil in Millfield. I want to know who. A long pause. Give me a week, Martin said. It took 4 days. Martin called on a Thursday morning while Tucker was in the middle of a brake job on a minivan. Tucker took the call outside, leaning against the building in the cold. The name you want is Conrad Hatch, Martin said. VP of Powertrain Engineering at Hartwell. Former Kessler-Wade. He was there during your last year. Tucker closed his eyes. He remembered Hatch. Vaguely, in the way you remember someone you'd always found slightly off. Smiling too easily in meetings. Always asking questions that felt less like curiosity and more like reconnaissance. He left Kessler-Wade 6 months before the collapse, Martin continued, joined Hartwell. 18 months later, Hartwell's powertrain division starts developing a fuel optimization system that their internal documents call the Meridian Adjacent Framework. The way Martin said those last 3 words contained everything. I pulled their patent applications from the last 2 years. Tucker, they're careful. They've changed the variable names, altered the architecture surface layer. But underneath it's your system. Anyone who knows what Meridian actually is can see it. Does Dunn know? That's harder to say. The legal team was brought in recently. Hatch ran the development under a different reporting structure. Martin paused. It's possible she genuinely doesn't know the origin. Or it's possible she knows and she's hoping a licensing deal buries the question of how they got it. Also possible. Tucker stood in the cold for another minute after they hung up. Nora was at school. The minivan was waiting. The maple had dropped another quarter of its leaves overnight. He went back inside and finished the brakes. The second call from Hartwell came 2 weeks later. Not from Dunn this time. From a man named Gregory Alcott, who introduced himself as chief legal officer and spoke with the careful warmth of someone who had spent a career being the most dangerous person in the room while appearing to be the most reasonable. "We'd like to restart the conversation," Alcott said. "Miss Mears, Dunn may have framed things in a way that didn't capture our genuine interest in partnership." "What changed?" Tucker asked. "Our board has prioritized resolving the patent situation. We want to do right by you, Mr. Reid." Tucker wrote down Alcott's name. "I'll come in next week." He drove back to Columbus on a Tuesday. Different meeting room this time, bigger, with a conference table and 4 people on Hartwell's side. Alcott in the center, flanked by 2 associates he didn't introduce. On the end, partially turned away from Tucker as he entered, a woman he hadn't met. She turned when the door opened. She was somewhere around 50, with the kind of face that had settled into authority over a long time. Dark hair, minimal jewelry, a suit that was expensive without being ostentatious. She looked at Tucker the way Dunn had, that same quick assessment, but where Dunn's had been evaluative, this one was more like recognition, like she was confirming something she'd already suspected. "Mr. Reid," Alcott said, "this is Beverly Crane, our chief executive." Tucker had looked up Beverly Crane in the weeks since Dunn's call. Stanford MBA, 20 years in automotive, CEO of Hartwell for the last 6. Under her leadership, the company had tripled in revenue and expanded to 2 international markets. She was considered one of the sharpest executives in the industry. She was also, Tucker had found in a detail buried in a trading profile from 3 years ago, the person who had hired Conrad Hatch. "Miss Crane," Tucker said, and sat down. Alcott walked through the partnership framework, a licensing agreement, generous royalty structure. Tucker's name acknowledged in Hartwell's public communications on the technology. A consulting role if he wanted it. It sounded good. It was designed to sound good. "There's something missing," Tucker said when Alcott finished. "What's that?" "How your company came to develop the Meridian framework." The room went very still. One of the unnamed associates looked at a point on the table somewhere to the left of his hands. "Our engineering team," Alcott began. "Your engineering team had access to a detailed proprietary system that took me 4 years to develop. I'd like to understand how." Tucker looked at Crane. "Specifically, I'd like to understand Conrad Hatch's role." Beverly Crane's expression did not change, which, Tucker had learned, was the thing to watch for. The absence of reaction in someone practiced at reactions. "Conrad Hatch is a talented engineer," she said. Her voice was measured, even. "He's built a strong team. He was at Kessler-Wade when I was developing Meridian. A lot of people were at Kessler-Wade. It was a large company. Not in the powertrain division. That was small." Tucker kept his voice level. Miss Crane, I'm not here to create a problem. I'm here because someone built something out of my work without licensing it, and I want to know how that happened before I sign anything." Alcott cleared his throat. "Mr. Reid, I think what we're all hoping for is a forward-looking arrangement." "I understand what you're hoping for," Tucker stood. "I'll wait for a forward-looking arrangement that starts with an honest backward look. Call me when you're ready for that." He made it to the elevator before Crane caught up with him. He heard her heels on the tile and turned. She stopped a few feet away. Up close, she looked less impervious. Not soft, nothing like soft, but something in her face was working. "You know what Hatch did," she said. "It wasn't a question. I have a very good idea. When did you find out?" "About 3 weeks after your first call." She was quiet. Behind her, through the glass wall of the conference room, Alcott was speaking in low tones to the associates. Nobody was looking out at the hallway. "He told me it was original development," she said. "You believed him. I had no reason not to." Her jaw tightened slightly. "He'd been with me for 2 years. He'd built the whole division from scratch." Tucker looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the 4 years in a lab at Kessler-Wade, about the nights he'd called Sarah and talked through problems he couldn't explain in plain language, and she'd listened anyway, asked questions she knew weren't the right questions, but somehow got him to the right answers anyway. About watching the company collapse and fighting through 6 months of legal proceedings to keep his name on his own work. He told you it was original, Tucker said. And now you're trying to license it from the person whose name is on the patents. Crane closed her eyes for 1 second. 1. Then they opened and they were sharp again. I need to know everything you have, she said. Documentation, correspondence, anything that traces Hatch's access to Meridian at Kessler Wade. Why would I give that to you? Because Hatch is still in my company, and if he did what I think he did, I need to remove him before this goes any further. She held his gaze. And because you want to protect your work, Mr. Reid. If this goes to litigation, it takes years, and the technology sits frozen in the meantime. Or we move fast, we remove the problem, and we build something that actually uses what you made. The elevator arrived. Tucker didn't get in. Give me a week, he said. He called Martin from the parking garage, told him what had happened. She's either genuine or she's very good, Martin said. Both, Tucker said. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He drove back to Millfield, picked Nora up from school. She had a project due on ecosystems and spent dinner explaining the water cycle to him with the focused intensity she brought to things she'd just discovered. He listened completely. It was easy to listen completely to Nora. She reminded him of Sarah that way, the way both of them could take something ordinary and make it feel like new information. He called Crane's direct line at 7 the next morning. I'll share what I have, he said, but I want to be in the room when you confront Hatch. That's not standard. I know it's not standard. A long pause. Tuesday, she said, 9 a.m. He was there at 8:50. The building felt different this time, or maybe he did. He took the elevator to the 22nd floor, and a different assistant led him to a room he hadn't been in before. Smaller, sparse. A table with 4 chairs, no Columbus skyline view. Crane was already there. So was Alcott and a woman Tucker didn't know. Early 40s, intense eyes, who introduced herself as Simone Farr from Hartwell's compliance office. At 9:15, Conrad Hatch walked in. Tucker had been trying to place the memory of him more precisely all week, and still hadn't quite gotten it. Hatch was in his mid-50s, compact and energetic, with silver at his temples and the easy confidence of a man who'd spent 2 decades being the smartest person in his immediate vicinity. He didn't see Tucker until he was nearly at the table. When he did, he stopped. Just for a half second. Just long enough. Mr. Hatch, Crane said. Sit down. Hatch sat. He looked at Tucker once more, and then looked at Crane, and his expression reorganized itself into something between concerned and confused. What's this about? This is about the Meridian system, Crane said, and how your team developed it. Hatch's confusion sharpened into something more practiced. Our fuel optimization framework is original Hartwell development. My team has the documentation, Mr. Hatch. Farr set a folder on the table. We've reviewed your team's internal development logs. The earliest entries date to 8 months after you joined Hartwell. The system architecture as documented in your patent applications matches Tucker Reid's Meridian patents at a structural level that our external IP reviewer called, and I'm quoting, not coincidental. Hatch looked at the folder. He didn't touch it. Conrad, Crane said, and her voice was quiet and not kind. I hired you because you told me you were building something new. I trusted that. I built a team. I built a division on someone else's foundation. Tucker said it levelly, without heat. On 4 years of work I did while you were in the same building, attending the same meetings, asking the same questions I thought were just curiosity. The room was very quiet. Hatch's jaw worked. He looked at Crane with something that might have been an appeal, the look of someone who'd spent enough time with her to know how to ask for things. Beverly, he started. Don't, she said. Alcott spoke then. Formal, careful, the way lawyers spoke when they were drawing boundaries. He talked about the compliance review, the external IP assessment, the documentation Farr had assembled. He talked about what came next in terms that were deliberately unclear, but not to Tucker, who had sat across enough tables from enough lawyers to understand the shape of what was being said. What was being said was, "You're done here." Hatch's face went through several things in a short time. Tucker watched him and felt something he hadn't expected to feel, which was tired, not triumphant, not vindicated exactly. Just tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and has finally been allowed to set it down. I want my lawyer, Hatch said. That's your right, Alcott said. Security will assist you in gathering your personal items. Hatch stood. He didn't look at Tucker again. He walked to the door, paused, then kept walking. The door closed behind him. The room was quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Crane said. She said it the way she seemed to do most things, directly without softening it into something easier. "For 2 years. For what was built without your knowledge, without your consent, on something you made." Tucker looked at the table. He thought about the garage in Millfield, about the way work felt when it was honest work, when the thing you put your hands on was the thing that needed fixing and nothing else was involved. "You didn't know," he said. "I should have asked better questions." Her voice was flat, not self-pitying, just accurate. "I hired someone whose qualifications I verified, but whose character I assumed. That's on me." Farr was gathering her files. Alcott was making notes. They might as well have been in another room. "Where does this leave us?" Tucker asked. Crane looked at him steadily. "Where you want it to leave us." She opened the folder in front of her. "Full licensing agreement, terms structured around your original patent applications. Retroactive royalties from the date Hartwell first deployed the framework commercially, which our records put at 22 months ago. Independent auditor to assess the revenue generated." She turned a page. "Or we go to litigation, which takes 3 to 4 years, during which Hartwell can't use the technology and you can't license it elsewhere. Your choice." Tucker looked at the agreement. The numbers were real. Not Dunn's number exactly, but real. The kind of number that would mean something for Nora's future, for the garage, for a life that had been built carefully and carefully within its means for 6 years. "There's something else," he said. Crane waited. "The fuel optimization system was designed for large diesel fleet vehicles. The application I always intended for it was commercial trucks, freight carriers, not passenger vehicles." He looked at her. "You've been developing it for passenger application." "More market share," she said simply. "The margins are thinner in fleet, less glamorous." Tucker folded his hands on the table. "But fleet is where it changes something. Long-haul trucks running my system reduce diesel consumption significantly enough to matter. Not in a quarterly earnings way, in an actual emissions way." He paused. "I want that to be the primary application." Crane looked at him for a long time. "You're talking about a strategic pivot in how we take this to market." "I'm talking about what I built it for. It costs us revenue in the short term. I know." She looked at the window. Columbus outside, the same gray sky as always, the kind of sky that made everything feel like it was waiting. "Alcott," she said, without looking away from the window. "Can we structure the licensing to prioritize fleet application in the first 3 years with passenger rights contingent on fleet rollout targets?" Alcott's pen paused. "It's not standard, but it's doable." "Then do it." Tucker was quiet for a moment. He hadn't expected that. He'd made the request the way you make a request you're not sure will be heard. He said. Crane finally looked at him. "Because I told you I was sorry for 2 years of using your work without asking. This is what sorry looks like when it has the ability to do something." He drove back to Millfield in the late afternoon. The sun had come out by the time he crossed the county line, low and slant through the windshield, the kind of light that made everything look briefly like it was being reconsidered. He picked Nora up from Mrs. Okafor's later than usual. She was finishing a drawing at the kitchen table and showed it to him before he'd even gotten his jacket off. It was Bucket, the yellow lab, sitting in what Tucker recognized as the garage. Sitting in the third bay, head tilted like he was waiting for someone. "He liked watching you work," Nora said. "He did," Tucker agreed. She went back to coloring. Tucker sat across from her and watched her for a while. The way she pressed her tongue between her teeth when she was concentrating, the way she held her crayons with the slightly too tight grip she'd had since she was 3, and that no amount of gentle correction had ever changed. He'd called Martin from the truck, told him what happened. "How much?" Martin had said. Tucker told him. Martin was quiet for a long time. "Tucker, I know. What are you going to do?" Tucker had thought about it for the last 2 hours of highway, the garage, the work, the town that had given him somewhere to put himself when everything else was in pieces. "Same thing I've been doing," he said, "just with better equipment." Martin laughed. It sounded relieved. That evening, after dinner, after the dishes, after Nora had brushed her teeth, and they'd read 2 chapters of the book she was currently obsessed with, Tucker sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened his laptop. There was an email from Crane, sent an hour ago. The subject line said, "Draft agreement. Please review." Below it, a longer message, more informal than anything she'd said in person. "Mr. Reid, Tucker, I want to be straightforward with you about something that went unsaid in the room today. When my team told me 8 months ago that our framework had attracted the attention of the patent holder, my first instinct was to make the problem go away quietly. That instinct was wrong. I'm not proud of it. What you did instead, coming in, asking the hard questions, pushing back on the forward-looking framing, that's the thing that got us to something honest. I don't say this to be sentimental. I say it because you should know that you were right to push, and that the agreement you're going to find attached reflects that." Tucker read it twice, set his coffee down. He thought about Sarah, about the way she'd always said the hardest thing wasn't being right, it was being patient enough to let right take its time. He opened the attachment. The agreement was long and he wasn't a lawyer, but he could read the structure of it, and the structure was what she'd promised. Fleet application primary, retroactive royalties, his name on the technology. He sent it to Martin and told him to have someone look at it. Then he closed the laptop and went to check on Nora. She was already asleep, one arm around a stuffed bear that was losing its stuffing from an ear. The nightlight made the room soft and orange. Her drawing of Bucket was on the dresser, propped up against the wall. Tucker stood in the doorway for a minute. The fight wasn't completely over. There would be lawyers and audits and the slow machinery of formal agreement. Hatch would lawyer up and there would be a process there too. These things always had process. But tonight the garage was his, and the work was his, and the name on the thing he'd made was his, and the little girl asleep in the orange light was his, and those facts, which had always been true, now had the backing of something official, something that couldn't be quietly absorbed and rebranded and presented as original development by a man with silver temples and a convincing smile. He went to bed before 10. In the morning, he woke up before Nora made coffee, looked out the kitchen window at the maple on Route 9 in the early gray light. Most of the leaves were down now. The tree looked different, bare, starker, and somehow more itself, the structure of it clear without the distraction of color. He heard Nora's door open, her feet on the floor, the particular shuffle of her half-awake morning walk. She came into the kitchen and looked at him with the still sleeping face she had at this hour, hair going in 3 directions. "Is today a school day?" she said. "Yep." She sat down at the table. "Can we have waffles?" They didn't have the mix. They'd had it and run out 2 weeks ago, and he kept forgetting to buy more. He looked in the cabinet, then at Nora, then back at the cabinet. "Yeah," he said, "we can have waffles." He found a recipe on his phone, made them from scratch, which took longer than the mix and produced waffles that were not perfectly even and slightly too crispy at the edges. Nora ate 3 of them and said they were the best waffles she'd ever had, which wasn't true, but which Tucker decided to believe anyway. They walked to the bus stop together, the 2 of them in the cold morning, leaves crunching underfoot. He held her hand the whole way. When the bus came, she hugged him around the waist, boarded, appeared in the window seat, and waved in the formal, serious way she had, one raise of the hand, like a small dignitary. He waved back. The bus pulled away. He stood there for a moment in the cold, hands in his jacket pockets, watching it go. Then he walked back to open the garage. There was work to do. There always was. And now, for the first time in a long time, it was entirely his.